You're listening to the Our Erie podcast with Marty Nwachukwu,
Lydia, Laythe,
and Davona Pacley.
This series will bring citizens, entrepreneurs, activists, politicians, artists, and thought leaders to the table for a frank discussion around societal issues facing our post-industrial city and the United States at large. Take a seat. Briefly, I know you as an awesome volunteer through work, but you're also this magnificent business owner in town who has a social justice lens and has really been vocal about some of the issues and concerns we care about. But you also have a really interesting backstory before you got to be this business owner. So we want to hear a little bit about your background and have a conversation about your journey and some of the things that's happened recently. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Chime in at any point in here if you want to dive into anything. But I'm an Erie transplant. So I'm originally from Waynesburg, Pennsylvania. So it's all the way down, and you use the hand as the Pennsylvania all the way down in the bottom right corner. Came to Erie for school. So I graduated from Gannon University with an engineering degree, mechanical engineering degree. And once I finished that, really just loved the area. So, for me, Erie is the big city, much larger than Waynesburg. Really just enjoyed Erie and what it has to offer. The balance between it strikes a good balance between that big city, the amenities, not having to drive 25 minutes to go do anything. Yeah. Instead it's 10 minutes to do everything. And then, but the balance between that, the big city kind of feel, and also, feeling like people know you, and that when I walk down the street, there are people that I recognize. I really love that about it. And even as a college student, really kind of felt that same energy, even not being really a part, there's always that university bubble. So even before piercing that, when I decided to stay in Erie long-term, I worked at Lord Corporation for a little over 8 years as a quality engineer. So I worked primarily in their manufacturing facility as a plant quality engineer, which I enjoyed, but at a point just kind of realized that I wanted to be more engaged with the community and feel more a part of the community. I think especially so Lord had a facility here on 12th Street that was very old, and during the World War II, kind of stuff just got added onto it. And so from a manufacturing standpoint, the flow of it was very bad. You'd have to run parts all across the plant multiple times. And so they moved to a new facility up off of I-90. Gorgeous. If you want to talk about manufacturing, bright lights, and it's just the exact opposite of what you think of when you think of a factory, right? It's so beautiful. But the challenge with that is it's all the way up off of I-90. And so you just end up, I felt just in this bubble where it's just I go there in the morning, especially in wintertime, right? You go up before it's dark. You are in there all day. There's a cafeteria, so you never have to leave. Mm-hmm. And then you come out and it's dark again. And it just felt this kind of relentless, kind of punching the clock type of thing. So I think that kind of after that move, just really felt super disconnected from the city. And so started driving this well, how do I get reconnected? And so I was and still am on many boards trying to make that, find those connections. And again, being so far away from downtown, it was I'd have to leave there, drive 20 minutes into town, have my lunch meeting, hour meeting, and then drive 20 minutes back. And so it now becomes a 2-hour lunch break that just is, again, just this constant struggle to try to make this find that feeling that I'm looking for. So at a point, like just started thinking like, okay, there has to be a better way to have that, like this feeling of engagement with the city and the community. And so just started exploring like what that could look like. And I kept coming back around to this like idea that I had when I was younger of like opening a coffee shop. And so in my younger days, it was like definitely like the romantic, like, oh, wouldn't it be so cool to have a coffee shop? But like obviously realizing too that like running a business is a lot of work and it's not going to be as, was well aware that it's not as romantic as it sounds. So like kind of always push that off because I'm like, I know it's not going to be like you see in the TVs where you're just hanging out and drinking coffee all day. Like that's not going to be it. So, so just kind of kept pushing that off, but it kept coming back up as I was like exploring like what that looks like for me. And so finally just said, well, you know what, like let's just explore it. Like, no, there's no strings attached to it. I can explore this idea without, saying, well, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Started exploring it, started having conversations, did like a market survey in town just to see like kind of what people would be willing to, what they're looking for, like how far are you willing to walk, how far are you willing to drive, that kind of thing. I knew that if I was going to do it, it had to be in the downtown footprint. And then also just having been around Erie long enough, like knowing it had to be on State Street, just really from like a success standpoint. So, so started exploring that, spent probably about like 6 months digging into that. Like, what would this, if I were to do this, it was always how I framed it. What would it look like? Like, what would I want the interior to look like? What kind of drinks would I serve? Really just starting to flesh out the ideas. And I put it all in a notebook, just kind of writing down, just like jotting it down, like on a corner, like sketching it out or whatever. And like 6 months later, looked at it and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a business plan. Like definitely needs some finessing, but like it's a business plan. And so then it was like, okay, well, I think this is actually like a viable option. So started digging into the kind of financials, like, is it viable in Erie? Yeah. And so started digging into that. And then, about another kind of couple months later, just realizing like, oh shoot, this is a viable business. And now I have to make the decision of like, do I move forward or not? And so luckily decided to move forward and, opened in December of 2017. So in a few months will be our 3-year anniversary, which is super exciting. And yeah, we're really happy to be a part of the community. And it definitely has fulfilled that, bringing it full circle, has brought that feeling of like, and really truly engaging with our community.
For sure. Yes. So I've been to your space many of times. So when you were envisioning in all those years before you acted on what your coffee shop would look like, is it what you thought it would look like? And like, what did you like kind of tap into for like creating your space?
Yeah, I think it really did. So we ended up the year before we opened, once I had kind of said, yep, this is something we're going to at least seriously like move forward with, seriously considering. Every time we traveled, we would just make it a point, and we had kind of done that before just because I enjoy coffee. And so like, we like going to different spaces. And I think that coffee shops and I think what draws so many people to them really are like a good first step when you visit a new place. So, first off, like you're usually traveling somewhere. So like getting, whether it's off a plane or out of your car and getting a cup of coffee is just for me really like rejuvenating. The second piece is like that you can interact with folks and be like, okay, hey, I'm here for the day or I'm here for the weekend. Like, what do I need to go do? I think they're really like nice introduction, but then I think they're also a really nice cross section of the community that you're visiting. So like you get to kind of see who is there and kind of the vibe of the city, and might not be like 100% representative, but like I think it's a good piece. So we've always kind of done that and anyway, but then once we kind of started like thinking about doing this coffee shop, anytime we'd go with a more like critical eye and just be like, okay, like what do we like about this place? What don't we like about it? What would we do differently? And so really just started kind of piecing together what that vision was. more in depth. So I think that my shop now, has really kind of hit those, like being a space where, people are able to, come for a work meeting, to come do homework, and then also to come and just like sit back, read a book, have a, in-depth conversation with whoever, someone that they're meeting. And we really intentionally created it. Those were kind of like the three main ways we, felt that people use coffee shops. I mean, there's certainly several other ways, but, just the kind of like lounge, whether by yourself or with somebody, to have a business meeting or to do homework, kind of were those three pieces. So really intentionally designed it around those uses. And then also, we had gone to one where the biggest complaint about our coffee shop is that there's not enough seats, which I can appreciate for sure. And I love that people want to spend time with us and in the shop with us. But, we had visited one where it was just a lot of like single tables, and, to like get to the middle table that was open, you to like shimmy past like four people and like, rub your butt against their back. And it was just really awkward. And I was like, I don't, this is not somewhere that like I want to come and bring a friend and sit and catch up with. It's like, and like the other tables right here. So if you're having like a semi-personal conversation, they're right there. So, so like, again, wanted to make it kind of feel where you have your different zones where you feel like at least some bit, you're not private, obviously, but some ability to kind of speak a little bit more freely. So yeah, I think that in my vision, especially once I started thinking about the, this space specifically, or my space, this concept specifically, it really did flesh out kind of exactly how we intended.
I'm going to transition us into a harder part of the conversation. Because you have created this amazing space downtown that like a broad base of people enjoy and love. In April, when the protests that were happening in light of the murder of George Floyd went late into the night, and there were some folks who did some damage to your business, there was like a lot of mixed response to it. But you stepped up and like responded in a way that marked how you as business owner were affected, but also marked how the bigger picture of the issue is what led to that incident. So I guess I want to ask you, going back, and I know like it feels forever ago, and like you don't have to talk about all of your feelings, but like what was it like to be there that night, maybe watching it live or seeing it later on the next day? What happened?
Yeah, so I was not downtown at the time, and I ended up getting a phone call or text, I can't remember at this point, from one of my employees, kind of just being that like, hey, this is an awkward conversation to have, but I think there's some damage that's happened at the shop. And so like, kind of was like, okay, I don't know what, like that could mean anything. And so obviously like got on Facebook, tried to like find some videos of stuff that was happening. Ended up, I don't remember if we stumbled upon it or someone sent it to us. One of the videos of kind of like the fire getting started. It was one of the views from like across the street. So it's just ends up being just a very bright flame. And so that was like kind of gut wrenching, right? Where you're like, I have worked so hard to try to get this business off the ground. Like, so, just start thinking about like all the nights that I've like not slept because I'm, I have to make payroll tomorrow and I haven't quite figured out how that's going to happen, like all that then like for one night. And so that was kind of the original like gut punch. And then, kind of calm down. And then, also trying to like find out like, okay, well, what's happening? What's really going on? We're lucky to be able to like see some other videos or the news, kind of like the live news, videos that were happening, and really being able to look at it and say, okay, it looks like it's actually pretty controlled. It's okay. and just saying like, okay, the reality is I'm not going to go down there tonight and find out. So we're just going to like let it go for tonight. And then to your point, Marty, has really shifted that conversation away from like, okay, we're not going to do anything about the physical location tonight. So let's talk about like our feelings about this and where, where I, as a person, where my, I talked to my husband about it, where we stand on like what's happening. I mean, like we was obviously not oblivious to us why the protests were happening, why, the feelings come out, potentially in damage. And so really started to frame our conversation around that. And so came kind of to the conclusion that like, people, we can talk about whether damage is, is a result of grief and how people grieve and how people express that, and, kind of bottled up feelings and centuries of oppression, like we can look at it from that way. We can look at it as opportunistic people that are, maybe not a part of the, people that are out there protesting for, equality and a better police system and better systems in general. So regardless of where that comes from, talking about like that it's not the effects of a protest, and it's not the, or it is, and it's, who are we to judge how people grieve and how these things come out, and looking at like, it's a, pane of glass, it's a, a wooden table, it's these things that, don't even come close to comparing to what, our Black community, you guys specifically too, like are experiencing your day-to-days. And so, it's obviously something that myself, my husband do not experience. And so like, how can we pass judgment on that? And so, the reality is like, that's what business insurance is for. And, things happen. And so kind of really just saying like, let's shift the conversation to why these things are happening and how we can be a part of the solution to kind of fix it. And so, yeah, so that's really, we wanted to be able to like be that, put that out there for like, people want to be mad for our sakes. And so we wanted to kind of redirect that conversation, like for our friends that were like really frustrated. And I get it. Like we were very, it's not something I want to wake up to on a Sunday morning and have to deal with, but the reality is like, there's a bigger conversation that needs to happen. And so we were happy to, we started the coffee shop, as we talked about earlier, as being the space for community and like really driving change in our community. And if like we needed to be, if that damage needed to happen to our space in order to facilitate that conversation, then we are happy to be here for that. And so that's, really kind of where we ended up for the night.
And what kind of response or pushback did you get when you like made your public statement? You've been listening to the Our Erie podcast, the voice of reason in the fog of post-industrial America. Next week, our guest will be Kristy Gnibus, Democratic candidate for Pennsylvania's 16th Congressional District, to break down her national campaign experience. Continue the conversation on Facebook/Our Erie Series. This podcast is produced by John C. Lyons, Marty Nwachukwu, Davona, Pacley, and Lydia Laythe. Funding provided by Erie Arts and Culture. Music by Corey Cook. We appreciate you for listening to Our Erie podcast. Peace.